Henry Cavill was born with the looks of a hero, a jawline carved from stone, a physique that seemed destined for the cape. But what made him unforgettable wasn't just appearance. It was how far he was willing to go to live his characters. For years, Cavill was Hollywood's almost man, losing Bond, Superman, and even Twilight to other names. But when the chance finally came, he didn't just take the roles. He gave himself over to them completely. As Superman, he carried himself like a god trying to walk among men. As August Walker in Fallout, he turned that same body into a weapon of fear. As Napoleon Solo, he became all wit and charm, the perfect 1960s spy. And as Geralt of Rivia, he disappeared behind the scars, the growls, and the quiet ache of a monster hunter doomed to care. Cavill didn't act his roles. He lived them, to the extreme. And that devotion, that refusal to compromise, won him fans around the world. But it also came with a cost. Because when you live every role to the extreme, eventually it breaks you. Before Henry Cavill became Superman, before he swung a silver sword as Geralt, he was known by another name in Hollywood, the unluckiest man alive. Time and again, he came within inches of greatness, only to watch it slip away. He auditioned for James Bond in Casino Royale. The director said he was perfect, but too young. He tested for Superman in Superman Returns. They went with Brandon Routh instead. Even Edward Cullen in Twilight was written with Cavill in mind, but by the time cameras rolled, he was deemed too old. The role went to Robert Pattinson, the same Pattinson who had already beaten him to Cedric Diggory in Harry Potter. For nearly a decade, Cavill was the almost guy. The handsome face directors noticed, but never the name on the poster. Then came the Tudors. On paper, Charles Brandon was just the king's loyal friend, a supporting player in someone else's story. But Cavill refused to fade into the background. He gave Brandon charm and swagger. Yes, but also layers of conflict. One moment he was the carefree companion to Henry VIII. The next he was weighed down by the compromises of power. His silences carried as much tension as his words, showing a man who could never quite escape the rot of the court. It wasn't yet the physical transformation that would define his later career. But in the Tudors, Cavill proved he could reshape not just his body, but his entire presence, turning a supporting role into something memorable. For the first time, he showed he could disappear into a character. And when destiny finally circled back with the role of a lifetime, he was ready to transform completely. When the call finally came, Henry Cavill knew this was it. After years of near misses, Zack Snyder chose him to wear the cape. But Cavill also knew he couldn't just play Superman. He had to rebuild himself from the ground up, until every step, every glance, looked like they belonged to the most powerful being on Earth. And when he finally put on the cape, he didn't play Superman as the cheerful savior audiences had known for decades. He played him as a man who looked human, but never felt like one. An outsider, burdened by power, searching for a place to belong. From the opening moments of Man of Steel, Cavill's performance leaned into tension rather than triumph. His Clark Kent isn't a confident reporter blending into the crowd. He's quiet, watchful, almost withdrawn, someone who desperately wants connection, but knows he can never truly fit in. Even in simple exchanges, Cavill let that ache seep through. A pause before answering. A glance that lingers a moment too long, the subtle weight in his voice when he talks about being alone. When the cape comes on, the transformation is striking. Cavill carries himself with stillness, as if every step is measured, every gesture carefully controlled. His Superman feels powerful not because of what he says, but because of what he withholds. The camera often lingers on his face in silence, and Cavill uses those silences to suggest a man calculating the cost of every choice. Even in action, his portrayal avoids spectacle for spectacle's sake. When he collides with Zod, the blows land with raw force, but Cavill makes it clear through expression and body language that Superman isn't reveling in the fight. There's hesitation in his movements, a flicker of reluctance in his eyes. Each strike seems to carry the knowledge that his strength could cause as much harm as it does good. And in the quieter moments, with Lois, with Martha, Cavill softens the performance. The way his voice lowers, the way his eyes relax, reminds us that beneath the godlike image is a son, a partner, a man aching for normalcy. Cavill didn't just wear the suit. He gave Superman a gravity, a melancholy, that made the character at once larger than life and painfully human. It was the breakthrough he had been waiting for. After Man of Steel, Cavill had become the face of perfection. The sculpted body, the stoic presence, the modern Superman. But the danger of perfection is that it can trap you. Once audiences see you as a god, how do you convince them you can be anything else? Cavill's answer was simple. Break the image. And he did it twice, in two radically different directions. In Mission Impossible, Fallout, he became the anti-Superman. As CIA operative August Walker, Cavill weaponized his size and presence into something menacing. He didn't glide through scenes with quiet nobility. He stomped into them, a blunt instrument of violence. The bathroom fight with Tom Cruise has become legendary, not just for the choreography, but because of how Cavill moved. The now famous arm reload, where he flexes like a machine cocking its guns, wasn't just a meme. It was pure characterization. Walker isn't a graceful assassin. He's a wrecking ball in human form. Every punch looked final. Every glance radiated disdain. Cavill twisted his superhero physique into something cold and terrifying, proving that the same body that inspired hope as Superman could also embody fear. Then in The Man from U.N.C.L.E., he went in the opposite direction. As Napoleon Solo, Cavill leaned into charm and wit, channeling the debonair spies of classic cinema. His timing was sharp, his voice smooth, his every gesture calculated. Where Walker radiated hostility, Solo radiated ease. He played Solo as a man always performing, smiling through danger, sipping wine in chaos, masking his opportunism with effortless grace. What made this role stand out wasn't just Cavill's suaveness, but his restraint. He knew when to let silence or a smirk do the work, especially opposite Armie Hammer's fiery Kuryakin. Their dynamic turned every exchange into a duel of styles. Brute force against elegance, fire against ice. Together, these two performances showed Cavill's willingness to reshape himself, not just physically but in essence. In Fallout, he stripped away Superman's nobility and became menace incarnate. In U.N.C.L.E., he minimized physical dominance and thrived on charisma and irony. Both roles proved he wasn't locked in a single archetype. And yet, they carried a shadow. Fallout made him unforgettable, but only as a villain in someone else's franchise. U.N.C.L.E. gave him the chance to lead with charm, but the film flopped, closing the door on a potential series. Cavill had proven his range, but Hollywood still seemed uncertain what to do with it. Still, these transformations mattered. They were Cavill stretching against the cage of perfection, trying to redefine what he could be. And that cage was about to tighten even more, with the role that defined both his greatest devotion and his breaking point. If Fallout and U.N.C.L.E. showed Cavill stretching against the cage of perfection, then The Witcher was where he shattered it. This wasn't just another role, it was the one he fought for, the one he believed he was destined to play. On paper, Geralt of Rivia is a monster hunter, scarred, mutated, stoic, a figure who grunts more than he speaks. But Cavill refused to let him be a one-note warrior. He infused Geralt with contradictions, brutal in combat, tender in private, detached from the world, yet quietly yearning for connection. From the very first episode, you could see the transformation. Cavill's Geralt didn't dominate scenes with dialogue. He dominated with presence. The way he stood, shoulders slightly hunched as if weighed down by centuries. The famous grunts and growls, clipped and guttural, carried more meaning than entire monologues. And when he did speak, his words landed with the precision of someone who measures every syllable. In battle, Cavill gave Geralt a rhythm all his own. His swordplay was fluid but heavy, each strike looking like it could cleave through more than flesh. But between the violence, there was stillness. A pause before a killing blow, a flicker of pity in his eyes, reminding us that Geralt was more than a weapon. He was a man forced into brutality. It was in the quieter moments, though, that Cavill truly disappeared into the character. The way he softened when speaking to Ciri, the rare warmth in his voice when he said Yennefer's name, the small smirks that broke through his otherwise hardened face. These glimpses of vulnerability made Geralt feel human beneath the scars and mutations. Cavill understood that what made The Witcher compelling wasn't his strength, but the way he reluctantly cared in a world that punished empathy. But off-screen, Cavill wasn't just performing Geralt, he was protecting him. He often pushed back on scripts, sending notes to the writers to make the dialogue closer to Sapkowski's novels. He insisted Geralt was more than a growling brute. He was a philosopher, a wanderer with a code, and Cavill wanted that voice to shine through. Fans later learned that some writers in the room didn't even respect the source material, and Cavill's devotion only sharpened the divide. In the end, that tension became unsustainable. Officially, the studio called his departure a mutual decision, citing scheduling and new projects. But for fans, the picture was clear. Cavill's uncompromising loyalty to Geralt had clashed with an adaptation that didn't share his vision. The role he poured himself into had become the role he could no longer keep. It was the ultimate escalation. From unluckiest man to Superman to breaking perfection, Cavill had finally found the role that consumed him entirely. And in losing it, he revealed the paradox at the heart of his career. The deeper he transforms, the more it costs him. Henry Cavill's story is not one of sudden collapse, nor of scandal and disgrace. It's the story of an actor who transformed himself again and again to meet the impossible demands of Hollywood. From the unluckiest, almost star, to the sculpted god of Man of Steel, to the blunt menace of Fallout, and the charming elegance of the man from U.N.C.L.E., Cavill proved he could stretch his presence in every direction. And with The Witcher, he gave perhaps his purest transformation, embodying a character so fully that fans couldn't imagine anyone else behind the white hair. But every transformation came at a cost. The endless training, the constant reinvention, the devotion to characters that sometimes meant clashing with the very people meant to shape them. Cavill showed the extremes of what it means to live a role, not just play it. And in the end, that devotion broke him, costing him Superman, costing him Geralt, leaving behind the paradox of a man too perfect, too committed for the system that created him. Today, Cavill stands at a crossroads. Projects like Warhammer 40K and Highlander promise new beginnings, but the shadow of his past roles lingers. Will he forever be remembered as the perfect Superman, who never got his sequel? Or as the Witcher who cared too much? Or can he finally find a role that doesn't demand transformation at the expense of himself?